All right, we're starting on page 225. Example 6 is where we left off. All right, the directions for example 6 say solve using the square root method. And the question is x minus 4 squared equals 7. So to use the square root method, we need to first get rid of, this square right here. To get rid of the exponent 2, we use a square root. So we're going to square root both sides. And of course, this exponent and this square root will cancel on the left side, and we'll be left with x minus 4. On the right side, you have to remember when you use the square root that there's actually two possibilities here. The positive and the negative, square root of 7. Since the square root of 7 doesn't simplify, we'll just leave it as a square root of 7. We're not done solving though, because we need to isolate this x. To get this x alone, we have to add 4. You're going to add 4 to both sides of the equation. On the left here, of course, those 4's cancel. But on the right, what does this look like? Remember that these cannot combine into the same term unless they have the same radical. So these are not going to make one term. We're just going to write this as 4 plus minus the square root of 7. And that's your solution for example 6. All right, for example 7, on page 226, we're going to start with the expression 4x plus 7 squared equals 3. And we're going to use the same method here. We're going to square root both sides. So this becomes 4x plus 7. Don't forget here that you actually have two different possibilities, the positive and the negative square root of 3. Since this doesn't simplify, we'll just leave it as the square root of 3, but now we need to isolate the x. So first, subtract 7. So we have 4x equals, and this is the same situation where these are not like terms, they're not going to combine. We just have negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 3. And then we need to divide off this 4. So we'll divide by 4. To do this on the right, just divide by 4 both sides. So x equals the negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 3 over 4. And that's your solution. For example 8, we have x squared equals negative 81. We're going to do the same thing, getting rid of this square using the square root. So we have x equals the square root of negative 81. If you remember from the last chapter, the square root of a negative number has an I. It's not a real number. We can take that I out. That would be the negative. So basically this is the square root of negative 1 times 81. The square root of negative 1 is I, and that comes out as a coefficient. So we're going to have an I, and we're going to have the square root of 81, which is 9. So this is basically 9i. X equals 9i. And don't forget, when you use this, we have to use that positive negative thing. So that translates here, positive negative 9i. Maybe we have room for example 9 here. Example 9 says 3x squared equals 48. All right, you know we want to use a square root to get rid of this square, but if we do it now, we end up with this 3 underneath the square root, and we don't want that because we want to isolate this x and just have the x under the square root. So let's get rid of this 3 first. In other words, do not use the radical until you have isolated the x squared. So divide off this 3, and we have x squared equals 48 divided by 3 is 16. Now we're ready to use the square root. And don't forget, you're going to have a plus minus here because of that square root. So we have x equals the positive and negative square root of 16, which of course is 4. All right, example 10 is a word problem, so you guys need to follow along in your book because I'm not going to write the whole word problem out here. So get your book out. If you don't have it out right now, look on page 227 and follow along in your book. I'm not going to write it all out for you. All right, it says the area of a circle is 305 square centimeters. Find the radius using the square root method. Use 3.1416 as an approximation for pi. Round the final answer to the nearest whole number. All right, we're talking about the area of a circle, so we've got to start with the area formula. The area of a circle is pi r squared. You should know that already. You're not going to be given these formulas if you have to use them on a test. The question tells us the area of the circle is 305 centimeters. So we can replace this A with 305. We also know we're using 3.1416 for pi, so we can replace this with 3.1416, and we have, oh, not pi, r squared here. All right, we're trying to isolate this r. The question asks us to find the radius. To do that, I need to get this off of here. So I'm going to divide by 3.1416. So divide by 3.1416. That's going to tell us what r squared is because those are going to cancel. And then I'm not even going to divide that out. You guys can use your calculator to divide that out. We have 305 over 3.1416 equals r squared. To get rid of this square, we're going to use a square root. When we use a square root on this, we have to say the positive negative here. So we have r equaling the square root, the positive negative square root of 305 over 3.14. Oh, I wrote this wrong. This should be a 6. There we go. And that, if you put it in your calculator, comes out to be positive negative 9.85. The directions asked us to round it to the nearest whole number. So here's the whole number. The 8 tells us to round up, keep it the same. So this is positive negative 10. However, if you remember, this question was about the area of a circle and its radius. Radius can't be a negative number. Geometric dimensions cannot be negative. So we can get rid of the negative here. And we could just say the radius is approximately 10 centimeters. All right, for example 11, again, we have a word problem. If the difference of a number and 2 is squared, the result is 3. Find the numbers using the square root method. All right, if the difference means we're subtracting. So we'll put a subtraction in there. What are we subtracting? The difference of a number, that's x, and 2. So x minus 2 is squared. So all of this is going to be squared. The result is means equals 3. So this is our equation to find the number. We need to get rid of this square. So we're going to use the square root. And don't forget, this will be plus minus square root of 3. This will become x minus 2 equals plus positive negative square root of 3. Need to isolate this x, so we'll add 2. And do not forget, these are not like terms. They will not come together. So this is going to be 2 plus minus the square root of 3, and that is the number. There are two numbers actually, because one's a positive and one's a negative. All right, for example 12, another word problem. The formula d equals 4.9 t squared is used for the distance d in meters that an object falls in t seconds. So I'm going to write that formula. D equals 4.9 t squared. An object is dropped from the 48-foot Osceola clock tower, which is 14.6 meters. How long does it take the object to hit the ground? All right. The formula d equals 4.9 t squared is used for the distance in meters that an object falls in t seconds. So we know that the 48-foot clock tower is actually 14.6 meters. So we're going to put the 14.6 here equals 4.9 t squared. The question is, how long does it take the object to hit the ground? So we're actually looking for this time right here. So we need to get this 4.9 off. So of course we're going to divide it. And you can plug this into your calculator, these decimals right here, you can plug into your calculator. We'll have 14.6 divided by 4.9 equals t squared. To get rid of this square, we'll use the square root. When we do that, this is going to be positive negative. So you can plug all this into your calculator. It's not a big deal. Looks like it comes out to be 1.7, positive and negative, 1.7, but this is a word problem. How long does it take the object to hit the ground? Remember, time can't be negative, so we'll reject the negative solution. And we could round this to the nearest whole number if we wanted. The directions actually don't tell us to round it to the nearest whole number, so I'm actually going to leave it as t equals 1.7 seconds. That looks like it's the end of the section. On page 228, you have homework. There are 9 equations that you need to use the square root method, and there are 3 word problems that I just reviewed for you how to figure out. So you should be working on all of those. I will see you in class.